Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, would you please stand for the arrival of the Honourable Paul Keating, Prime Minister of Australia, and Mrs Keating. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, would you please be seated? Thank you. Honourable Prime Minister Paul Keating, Prime Minister of Australia, ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I would call now on the Honourable Michael Behan, President of the Senate, to address you. Thank you.
Prime Minister Paul Keating and Mrs Keating, the Minister for Veterans Affairs, the Honourable Con Chaka, Senator Margaret Reid representing the Leader of the Opposition, the Speaker of the ACT Assembly, the Honourable Greg Cornwall representing the Chief Minister of the ACT and Mrs Cornwall, the Dean of the Diplomatic Corps and Mrs Fepulai, and members of the Diplomatic Corps, my parliamentary colleagues, and there are many here, distinguished guests, and I include among those, of course, the veterans themselves who are our most distinguished guests today, ladies and gentlemen. My task is a very simple one this morning, is to welcome you to Parliament House. The Speaker, Stephen Martin, and myself are responsible for this area. This is our patch, if you like. And I know the Speaker, who's unable to attend today, wants to be associated with the comments that I make in welcoming you here this morning. And the welcome is a very real one. This is a very special event in the Australia Remembers calendar, and I'm particularly happy that our task is to one of those women who served this community during World War II. It's nothing new to say that history has consistently underrated the role of women. Not only, of course, their role in war, but their role in other spheres of activity, in settling this country, for example, in building this country, and in so many other areas. They've been underrated by historians, possibly because most of the historians have been male. So I'm particularly pleased that on this first opportunity that the Parliament has had to host a major commemoration in this important year of commemoration, that it should be to honour the women who served us so well so many years ago. There's no doubt that without the contribution of the women of Australia, not only those who joined the forces, some 65,000 women who were members of the forces in uniform, and those other ones in uniform at home in the Land Army, and those that were not in uniform but were supporting in various ways the war effort, and those both overseas, who served overseas, and those who served at home. There's no doubt that without the efforts of those people, we could not have sustained the effort needed to ensure Australia's contribution to the eventual victory which we enjoyed. There's no doubt either that your service during the war, not only in directly war-related activities, but in all spheres of activity, was a catalyst for social change, in the better recognition of women, in better rights for women, in better access to employment for women, from which many young women are now the beneficiaries. It is indeed, Mr. Chairman, a privilege to host this important function. The Speaker and I, on behalf of all members of Parliament and senators, welcome you very warmly and thank you for the very great effort that you made on behalf of this country.
Thank you, Senator Ben. Now that everybody has been welcomed, I would ask you to recognise the banners now being paraded into this assembly. Thank you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Those of you who have been responsible, of course, for having the banners brought here, I would like to say to you how good they looked as they came in here, and congratulations to all of you on that behalf. I will now invite the Woden Valley Youth Choir, which is directed by Mr. Don Whitbread, to sing the Captives Hymn. They will be accompanied by the Royal Military College Band under the direction of Major Ian McLean. Thank you.
Here
Prime Minister, Mrs Keating, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. The introductory address for this special commemoration of women who served in the Defence Forces during World War II will be delivered by the Minister for Veteran Affairs. I would say to you that there has been nobody who has put so much enthusiasm and showed so much enthusiasm as the Minister for Veteran Affairs has done in what has been achieved so far in this year of Australia Remembers. When he first came up with the idea, I was one who was invited to be on the committee with him to plan what might occur. And I remember that first occasion when he came into the office and he sat down and the enthusiasm just flowed out of him all over it, all over the place and virtually all over us who were there. He has continued that display of enthusiasm for Australia Remembers since that day. Everything that has happened, I can assure you, has been urged along by him, led by him, encouraged by him. And I'm sure that our reputation overseas, where he's been as a leader of the many pilgrimages that have taken place, will always be remembered. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to introduce to you the Honourable Con Shaka.
Prime Minister and Mrs Keating, Mr President, Mr Bean, President of the Senate, Senator Margaret Reid, representing the Federal Opposition, other parliamentary representatives, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, ex-service women who prefer to call themselves female veterans, and everybody else that's here as well. After that introduction, I've got to put the halo away, Jeff. I don't think that it's all my doing, but I can say to you that there's a great deal of people that have worked very hard on this Australia Remembers project. And when I was able to obtain the approval of the Federal Cabinet and the Prime Minister for this, I must admit it wasn't very hard to sell. It was an easy product to sell. And I've got to say to you that Australia Remembers has really touched something out there in the Australian community. And today is one of probably 3,000 to 4,000 events that is happening around Australia under the Australia Remembers banner. What we tried to do at the beginning was to ensure that we tried to leave no one out. And of course, the women at war, the story of the women at war was one that had never been properly told. Indeed, it would probably be right to say that the entire story of World War II has never been properly told. We know more about World War I, and of course those people were heroes. But so were those that served in some way, either overseas or at home, in World War II. And in fact, World War II, as one announcer says, touched the lives of every Australian. And it touched the lives of many of us that were not Australians at that time. And that's why I've had that enthusiasm for it. And that's why I thought it had to be done, that we did something specifically to recognise the ex-service women. Mind you, I had a few whips along the line there from June Stone and Amy Taylor and a few others. And I'll tell you what, they've done a magnificent job, can I tell you on this. But can I say that when I watched you marching out there and I saw the look of pride on your face, it not only brought tears to the eyes of those around me, but it also brought a few to me. And one person came up to me and she said, "Minister, you don't know what this means to us." Well, I think I do, but you all don't know what it means to all of us too, that just watched you and know how proud you must feel, and you deserve to feel proud, because 67,000 of you joined, and you were there to do whatever was asked of you. Some of you served overseas, some of you didn't. But those of you that didn't played a vital role in the war effort at home. And you did jobs as good as the men. And you proved that you were worthy and that you were part of the entire war effort. So it's been a labour of love, if you like, for my department, for all those people involved in this particular commemoration ceremony, this prime ministerial thank you to the ex-service women of Australia, our female veterans. And I can assure you that I'm very hopeful that you remember this day for many, many years to come. On behalf of myself and all those people associated with organising today, let me say a very big welcome to you. I hope you enjoy the day, and please feel free to be proud. And if you want to shed the odd tear today, do so. You deserve all the consideration you get today. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, my pleasure on this occasion to welcome the Prime Minister to address us. He will give an address on behalf of the people of Australia, and I'm sure that in what has been said by Minister Konchaka, that there are other and many thousands, hundreds of thousands of people in Australia who are thinking of this today. Ladies and gentlemen, the Honourable Paul Keating, Prime Minister of Australia.
Thank you, Mr. President. My ministerial colleague, Konchaka, the President of the Senate, Senator Reid, Your Excellencies, distinguished guests and ladies and gentlemen. I'm very honoured to be delivering this address, and both Konchaka and I have been delighted with the warmth that Australia remembers as a series of commemorations have been greeted, because it's not simply some kind of pageant in a rolling series of commemorative events, but we felt, and the government felt, that the sacrifice and the cost and the commitment to the pursuit of freedom and democracy in the Second World War had to mean something in the contemporary environment, had to mean something 50 years later, so that we all remember that sacrifice and we all celebrate the liberty which it brought. At the launching of Australia Remembers almost a year ago, I said the government wanted women to be involved in the commemoration to an extent that women have not been involved in the past in any national commemoration. And I'm happy to say we've not been disappointed. And it's my very great pleasure to welcome all of you to Parliament House today and to thank you for coming. Today we remember what Australian women gave to their country and the cause of freedom in World War II. They gave their labour and their love of this country, and many of them gave their lives. They gave themselves totally to the defence of Australia and the things Australia stood for: the principles of freedom, democracy and human decency, the way of life Australians had constructed here for their communities and their families. They worked at tasks Australian women have never taken on before. They served in places where Australians had never been. They served as one regardless of where or what circumstances they came from. They played an essential role in the defence of Australia. As Konchaka said, the response to calls for enlistment in the women's services was overwhelming. Some 67,000 women enlisted in our armed forces. Within a year of the declaration of war in Europe, almost a third of all Australia's trained nurses had volunteered to serve overseas. The first of them embarked within 4 months of the beginning of the war, and they served in Palestine, Libya, Egypt, Greece, Eritrea, Syria, the Southwest Pacific, and of course in Britain. Their experience is part of the Australian experience. It's inseparable from our military history, our national legends and traditions, and the inspiration and values we draw from these things. Women served during the Blitz on London. They saw war in the deserts of North Africa. In Greece, they served through frequent air raids and narrowly missed the arrival of invading German troops. In Malaya, Ceylon, Singapore, Papua New Guinea, the Solomon Islands, New Britain and Borneo, many became internees and suffered terrible deprivations. Some, of course, were brutally murdered. 41 Australian Army nurses died in the fall of Singapore or as internees of the Japanese. From those terrible experiences emerged many stories of heroism. And I think we're all familiar here with the story of Sister Vivian Bullwinkle, who was the sole female survivor when nurses who endured the sinking of the Vina Brook were put to death by the Japanese. Less well known is the experience of the nurses who were captured on Rabaul and, along with a number of civilians, sent to Japan. Here they were lodged in the Yokohama Rowing Club and provided with a few items of clothing and an inadequate diet. One member of the group, Sister Anderson, described their imprisonment. They worked at knitting small silk bags, making and gluing envelopes, and heavier tasks such as constructing air raid shelters, carrying bundles of firewood and clearing paths in the snow for guards to walk through in knee boots, but the women were barefooted. Sometimes the women became so hungry they cooked and ate the glue that they were using for the envelopes. There are other stories I think we should record today. In the bombing of Darwin on the 18th of February 1942, Sister Margaret de Mestre and 11 other staff of the hospital ship Manunda were killed. Only one nurse was among the 64 survivors of the torpedoing of the hospital ship Centaur. She was Sister Nell Savage, who was awarded the George Cross for helping others while they floated on debris and rafts waiting for their rescue. 55 Australian Army Nursing Service members received decorations for their Second World War service, including 2 George medals. 82 were mentioned in dispatches. Many other Australian women served in medical units. Members of the Australian Army Medical Women's Service, previously known as the Voluntary Aid Detachments, served with our Army nurses throughout Australia and in New Guinea and in Borneo. Their dedication was personified by Ms May Douglas, the senior representative of the Women's Wartime Services present here today. Originally a nursing orderly for the AIF, Ms Douglas was commissioned in 1941 with the prospect that she might accompany the Army overseas. But her talents were employed in Australia where, in 1943, she was promoted to Lieutenant Colonel and appointed controller of the Australian Army Medical Women's Service. And in this capacity, she travelled in Australia and New Guinea, visiting hospitals where her troops were serving. Today, I'd like also to acknowledge the women of other medical units, the members of the Australian Army Physiotherapy Service who served in the Middle East and the Pacific on hospital ships and in base and forward areas. The women members of the Australian Army Medical Corps who served in military hospitals both in Australia and overseas as doctors, physiotherapists and masseurs. The women of the Royal Australian Naval Nursing Service who cared for Australian and Allied servicemen on bases throughout Australia as well as at Milne Bay and on the hospital ship Manunda. And the women of the Royal Australian Air Force Nursing and Medical Service, members who served not only in Australia but also in New Guinea and in air evacuation units in Canada and in the United States. Not all the women who served Australia served as nurses, of course. 27,000 members of the Women's Auxiliary Australian Air Force, fondly known as the WAAFs, worked in 72 of the 120 Air Force trades. And we might note today that they received just 2/3 or less of the male rates of pay. The WAAF changed the role of women in wartime. The women were subject to rules which now seem at best curious. For instance, they were not supposed to serve further north than Cairns or Geraldton. Nevertheless, some did serve in Darwin and the northwest of Western Australia and in New Guinea and in the Solomon Islands. They were also not supposed to fly aircraft, although I'm told 2 women, Nell Palfreyman and Margaret Pittington were given some experience in this traditional part of Air Force life. I'll bet they're pretty good at it too. In acknowledging the WAFs today, I think it's true to say that we recognise not only the great service that the WAFs rendered to the country in wartime, but the example they set for the peace, for example, of women's capacity and the right to play a part in realms of our national life from which they had formerly been excluded, always been excluded. The same might be said of the Australian Women's Army Service, which was formed in 1941 with the same objective of releasing men from fighting units. Thousands of women rushed to enlist in what became known as AWARS. By 1944, the number totalled over 24,000. Again, they were paid just 2/3 of the male rate. Apparently that was the rate in AWARS. They are grudgingly allowed the same rank as women and provided with the same, as men, provided with the same basic equipment, with one difference apparently. They are allowed to have a vase of flowers on the cupboards by their beds. In November 1944, the War Cabinet approved the posting of 500 members of AWARS to New Guinea. I don't know if the same conditions applied then. When women were first admitted into the Royal Australian Navy in 1941, they were admitted under the proviso that there be no publicity about this break in tradition. I don't know why that was needs said, but that's the way things were. Over 3,000 women enlisted in the Women's Royal Australian Naval Service during the Second World War. None went to sea because it was thought inappropriate to have women on ships, but they played an extremely important role, not least in the Allied Intelligence Bureau and the Coastal Watching Service. Then there were the 7,000 members of the Australian Women's Land Army, who, while not one of the services, wore uniforms, were subject to discipline and learned to take orders. They covered the loss of 100,000 farm workers who joined the Defence Force. As John Curtin said, their work was hard, demanding, constant and vital to the war effort. Of course, Australia honours all our veterans, including those who stayed at home and kept the country running. During the war, Australia turned to women as a vast untapped labour resource, and by 1944, 250,000 women were working in Australian factories. Over 40% of munitions workers were women. Much of the work was hideously monotonous and of course harmful to their health. They suffered hardship and illness, but they made a huge contribution to winning the war and therefore to our freedom and the preservation of our democracy. They made a massive contribution to the story of Australia, and I hope that after today Australians will always acknowledge this. Our generation and generations to come should know that when liberty was threatened, Australian women rallied to defend it. No less than Australia's men, they are prepared to give their labour and also their lives. We should all know that we owe them, to no small extent, our freedom and our way of life, including that part of it which today makes it possible for women to share much more fully in the work and the rewards of this country. This generation of Australian women were both pioneers and defenders of the Australian faith, and today all Australia salutes them. Thank you.
Thank you, Prime Minister. I would now invite the choir to again sing for us. They will sing Praise My Soul, and again will be accompanied by the Duntrin Band. Thank you.
To his feet
Prime Minister, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure now to call on the Chief of Defence Force of Australia, General John Baker, AC. General Baker.
Prime Minister and Mrs Keating, Minister for Veterans Affairs, President of the Senate, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, lady veterans. To you especially, it's a great honour on behalf of all members of your Defence Force today to be here today to salute you. We salute you, the veterans. Australia, as we know it today, has been shaped largely by sacrifices made in war, the value Australians place on freedom, and the effort of those who contributed in so many ways. This year, the 50th since the end of World War II, the year Australia remembers, is of special significance to all of us who serve today. It is a year which reminds us of our heritage, of the service of our predecessors, and of the standards that we who serve today need to achieve. You that marched this morning and are participating here today represent not only those high values, but also the spirit of the women of Australia of the 1940s. Your generation bore not only the brunt of domestic support, but when called, served in a much more active way, both at home and abroad. In this, you were pioneers. You changed the face not only of the Defence Forces, but of Australian society at large. Since the day you answered the call, women have played an expanding role in society in Australia, and I am pleased to say, in the Defence Force. By your service, in difficult and demanding conditions, both at home and abroad, you not only demonstrated that it could be done, but also that it could be done with great distinction. In those days, as the Prime Minister has noted, your functions were more limited and your rewards much less than those of men. Today it is different. Women have a much wider choice of roles they can play within the Australian Defence Force. Their contribution is growing steadily and will continue to grow, not only in numbers, but also in leadership of your Defence Force. In this way, your contribution did not end with victory in the Pacific, but continues to this day and beyond. You, the veterans, set the pattern. So I hope today not only rekindles fond memories for you and reminds you of your own special and private thoughts, but is also a recognition of the changes in Australia which you wrought. So on behalf of Australia's Defence Force today, we welcome this opportunity to honour your contribution to the defence of this nation, both at home and abroad. Each of you has left us a legacy that has ensured the freedom of our country, our people, and our unique way of life. We who serve today are honoured to participate in this occasion. We're proud of you.
You heard Prime Minister mention before a young lady, Lieutenant Colonel May Douglas. And I say young lady, sitting here, looking sprightly. And it is my pleasure now to call on Lieutenant Colonel May Douglas to address you on behalf of all the excellent services. Yes.
Prime Minister, Senator Reith, Mr. Chair, the Minister for Veterans Affairs, I think that we feel it's a great privilege today that we're here and that these very busy people have taken the time to come to our reunion. The Minister for Veterans Affairs has done a magnificent job, which you will all agree, in getting us here. I feel it's a great privilege to be asked to talk to you today, and I hope you'll all realise that I'm talking not only for myself, the last survivor of the heads of women's services during the war, but also to all those people who have gone on ahead of us, whom we miss very badly today. We have, I hope you all realise that I'm speaking for all of them. For the senior nurse for the RANs, Matron Laidlaw, for First Officer Sheila McClemens, who was the director of the RANs, for the Matron-in-Chief, the AANS, which has now got a royal attached to it, Matron Sage, who was a wonderful person, for Colonel Sybil Irving, who organised the AWAS. How lucky we were to have her, because her father had been a soldier and she had lived in every state in Australia, and she knew a great many senior officers who were a great help to us. Then there were the VADs, which I joined in 1938, which grew on to the Australian Army Medical Women's Service. Colonel Kathleen Best was the first director of that service, succeeded by Colonel Walker, who had to retire for ill health, and I came on from 1941 to 1946. How lucky I was, because I got all over Australia, over a great deal of the Southwest Pacific area, and I met a lot of interesting people. I had a very jolly good time. I went in all sorts of odd transport, flying boats, planes, and quite a lot by sea, quite a lot by train, and flying, of course, a great deal. Then there was the RAAF Medical Service. The director of nursing for that was Wing Officer Irene Lang. Sadly, all those people are gone. There are quite a lot of memorials to them in various places. The big one in Concord Hospital in Sydney. There's memorials to Colonel Irving all over Australia. We have one in three in every state, and a very good memorial, a great pergola covered with wisteria, which is here out in Commonwealth Gardens. Then we had all the people who were attached to the various services, who were enlisted, the physiotherapists, the occupational therapists, people attached from Red Cross, and so on and so forth. Well, now, since the war, all these women have gone on doing very useful jobs for Red Cross, or their churches, Girl Guides, for the RSL, and so on. And I always say to them that one of the most important things they do is bringing up their families, because they were disciplined people, and I think the service women's children, on the whole, get on pretty well. When there were many of you know that there are quite a lot of books written about the women's services. There was a good one, which I think many of you will have read, which is White Coolies, and I was delighted today that we had that excellent hymn, the Captives Hymn, written by Miss Dryburgh, who was a wonderful English missionary, and sadly she died just a few weeks before they were rescued. But she did a great deal to help all those people who were prisoners in various parts of the archipelago. Then there's a very good one, which is written about the Australian Army Medical Women's Service, called they all were determined to be nurses. And then there's one which is written about all the services, and there's one recently written for North Queensland. You see, none of us, apart from those people who the sisters who were prisoners, and the people who were bombed in Darwin, people in North Queensland were very worried and anxious because they didn't know when they were going to be bombed. And if it hadn't been for the sea battle, they probably would have been. But all those, we were never really in any particular danger. And we had the greatest respect for all those people who managed to battle through being prisoners, and the people who battled through Darwin, which was pretty bad. They've just had a very good reunion in Darwin. They had over 900 people there. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to go to that. But we've had a very happy time, and we're most grateful to the Minister for Veterans Affairs, who's taken so much trouble for us over all this, and I think it really was terrific. Most of you will remember what happened, as I do, 50 years ago, jolly so better than what happened last week. When we were enlisted, we all swore to serve our king and country. Let us, with God's help, continue with God's help, we continue to do that for the years that are left to us.
Thank you very much, May Douglas. That was very interesting, and as May said, it only seemed like yesterday. I wonder how much truth there really was in that. However, it was lovely to hear. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd ask you now if you would please stand for the hymn, "The Lord is My Shepherd," which will be led by the Woden Valley Youth Choir. At the end of the hymn, would you please remain standing for prayers? Thank you.
You prayer of remembrance. Creator God, you made human beings in your image. Male and female, you have made them with gifts and graces to be used for the benefit of all. Today we remember the contribution that Australian women made to the defence of this nation over 50 years ago. Then our nation was under attack. Our sovereignty was threatened, our freedom challenged. Men and women from all parts of our Commonwealth and from every section of our society made great sacrifices in the defence of our land. We remember that Australian women served in the three services, the Navy, the Army and the Air Force. They served in many areas, in communications and transport, in industry and catering, in nursing and welfare, in administration and local defence. We remember too the contribution of those at home in maintaining the processes of food production and distribution, and the way in which Australian women filled the roles played by men in industry, commerce and education. We remember the way in which women on the home front helped maintain the morale of men close to the fighting and those held prisoner by their knitting and writing letters and sending food parcels. As a nation, we remember the vital work done by Australian women in the defence of our nation 50 years ago. We honour their contribution. God of comfort, today we pray for all Australian women who suffered as a result of their involvement in the war effort. And we remember especially those who paid the supreme sacrifice and died in the service of their nation. Grant comfort to all who remember them. God of the Southern Cross, as we remember the past, help us to dedicate ourselves to the service of Australia. Our freedom was preserved. Help us to value it. Peace was won. Help us to enhance it. May Australia continue to be a land of opportunity to all our citizens, and may the example of the Australian women who contributed so much to the defence of our nation 50 years ago be an inspiration to us today in making our contribution to the common good of Australia. To the God of all people we give honour, glory and praise, now and always. Amen.
A prayer for peace. Eternal God, you have so made us that truth and justice, goodness and peace are values embedded in the human heart. We acknowledge that men and women are frail and succumb to selfishness, greed and aggression. We acknowledge too that disagreements develop between nations and that too often they have gone to war. Have mercy upon our human frailty. God of new beginnings, prosper the endeavours of all who work for justice and strive for peace. Within the life of Australia, bless the efforts of all those who work for reconciliation, mutual respect, acceptance and friendship between our diverse people. Within the international community, bless the efforts of all Australians who work for peace and the relief of poverty. Members of the Australian Defence Force engaged in peacekeeping operations, diplomats, aid workers and people engaged in cultural exchanges. By their endeavours, may bridges of understanding be built, links of respect and acceptance created, and ties of friendship formed. God of the past, we give thanks that in the past Australians, men and especially women, sacrificed so much to preserve freedom and to maintain peace. God of today, put the same kind of spirit in the lives of Australians so that our nation may journey along the same paths, work for freedom, justice and peace, and the human condition made better and richer for all. And keep before us the example of the Prince of Peace who said, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God." We offer this prayer in his name. Amen.
Amen. A prayer for Australia. Great Spirit of this ancient land, hear our prayer for the land and people of Australia. We pray your blessing on this continent which is our home. Already you have blessed it with magnificence and variety. It has warm tropical belts and vast arid plains. It has rich coastal regions and fertile farming areas. It has productive waters that wash our shores and significant mineral wealth. Creator God, we thank you too for the flora and fauna that are so special to our homeland. Help us to care for these wonderful and rich gifts. Keep always before us our duty to cherish this heritage and pass it on in good repair to generations of Australians still to come. God of unity, we pray for this people. So many have migrated from other places to this land. Many of us have been born here. Australia is our home. It has been a land of new beginnings, a place of fresh starts for so many, and we have all benefited from its prosperity. God of Australia, people of many generations have contributed to the common good of our nation in times of peace and war. Help us today to serve you through serving the nation we love. Lift us beyond greed and selfishness. Liberate us from prejudice. And bind us together as one people, rich in diversity, but united in our commitment to freedom, social justice and peace. God of our past, our present and our future, we give you praise and honour, now and always. Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, the prayers were offered by the Principal Chaplain of the Royal Australian Navy, Right Reverend Monsignor Max Davis, Principal Chaplain and Archdeacon to the Army, the Venerable Bruce Horton, and the Principal Chaplain of the Royal Australian Air Force, Air Commodore Roger Burt. I'd ask you please if you'd now be seated. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, wreaths will now be laid and the band will provide incidental music through the wreath laying. I would ask that the Prime Minister and Mrs Keating please lay the first wreath. Senator, the Honourable Michael Behan, President of the Senate, and the Honourable Con Shaka, Minister for Veteran Affairs. Senator, the Honourable Margaret Reid, representing the Leader of the Opposition, and the Opposition Spokesman for Veteran Affairs, Mr Wilson Tuckey, and Mr Greg Cornwall, MLA, representing the Chief Minister of the Australian Capital Territory. Major General Digger James, AO, MBE, MC, National President of the Returned and Services League, and Mr Peter Alexander, CMG, OBE, OAM, National Secretary, representing the National Chairman of the Australian Veterans and Defence Services Council, General John Baker, AC, Chief of the Defence Forces of Australia, and Colonel Coralie Gerard, Director of Nursing Services in the Australian Defence Force. Colonel Gerard is the senior female officer in the Australian Defence Force. His Excellency, Mr Faye Sango, Siaho Osi, Faipule Aihi, the High Commissioner for Western Samoa and Dean of the Diplomatic Corps. Ms. Edith Eadie, on behalf of the female veteran community. ladies will lay a floral tribute on behalf of the female veteran community in their state. Mrs. June Stone. Mrs. Florence Coots, representing Victoria. Mrs. Brenda Williams, OAM, representing Queensland. Mrs. Coral Farrelly, OAM, representing South Australia. And also Mrs. Joan Dowson, MBE, representing Western Australia. Mrs. Marjorie Quinn, MBE, representing Tasmania. Miss Dulcie Thompson, representing the Australian Capital Territory. And Miss Betty Woods, Mrs. Betty Woods, representing the Northern Territory. Some school children have been invited to lay floral tributes also. Thank you, girls and boys. That was very nicely done indeed. Prime Minister, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, would you please stand for the ode, which will be delivered by Mrs. June Stone, BEM, Chairman of the Council of Ex-Service Women's Association, New South Wales.
We remember the nurses who suffered and died on the land, in the sea and in the air. We remember the servicewomen who died overseas and in Australia, and we will remember our friends. And in particular, too, we remember those magnificent women who were our leaders and who shaped the rest of our lives. And I remember, in particular, Group Officer Claire Stevenson. They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow older. Age shall not weary them, nor the years contemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them. We will remember them.
Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. Prime Minister, Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I now invite Ms Victoria Cotton to deliver an address on behalf of the Australian youth. Ladies and gentlemen, Ms Victoria Cotton.
I was asked to speak today on behalf of the young people of Australia because my grandmother, Mrs Lorna Ward, who is here today, served in the Australian Army Medical Corps during World War II. My grandmother joined the 2nd AIF as a physiotherapist and sailed for the Middle East in 1941 in her early 20s. As part of the 2nd 9th Australian General Hospital, she moved around, treating war casualties in Kantara, Abdelkadir and Nazareth, before returning to serve in Australia in 1942. She has told me about many of her wartime experiences, the hard life and dangers everyone endured, and the imaginative improvisations that had to be made in treatments when supplies ran out. She has also shown me a more personal side to the war, recounting tales of the great friendships which grew between the women, many of which are still kept up to this day, as well as of lighter moments of girlish pranks played on their long-suffering superiors. But you can rest assured, I'm not about to reveal any military secrets, Grandma. Today is a truly special day for my grandmother and for all the women who served in Australia's Defence Force during the Second World War. They made amazing sacrifices and often worked under extremely arduous conditions, so different from their lives before the war. 2 and 3 generations on, having been spared the World War, young Australians this year are attempting to understand the causes and consequences of the Second World War. 50 years ago, ordinary people, not much older than us, were put into extraordinary circumstances and required to make incredibly difficult decisions. Their courage and willingness to risk all in a fight against oppression and brutality is something we look upon with respect and admiration. We are attempting to put faces and names to the statistics of the war so as to understand the sense of loss and anger and bewilderment still felt by so many in our community. In the course of our discovery, we are coming to appreciate just how much was sacrificed to ensure that the basic values of freedom, tolerance, respect for others, and equality of opportunity were preserved for us. My generation has had no direct experience of war, and we hope we never will. But today, I have the opportunity, on behalf of all the young people of Australia, to say thank you to you, our female veterans, for the courage and commitment which you demonstrated, and to acknowledge that the advantages we enjoy we owe to the sacrifices you made during those long and difficult years. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Victoria. Prime Minister, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, would you please now stand for the national anthem? 2 verses will be sung. Thank you.
Our congratulations to you. On behalf of the female veterans that were here today, we'd like you to accept this memento because we want to thank you for making it possible. And we know you've had a wonderful liaison with our Veterans Affairs Minister, but this is something for you to put there and think of the female veterans and know that we're a very proud lot of ladies and we're very proud of you.
An old Trafalgar Street girl.
That's right. Thank you very much. It's my pleasure.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon and welcome to this third part of today, our concert for you, and it's our great delight to be here for the next hour. We had so many requests for various marches to play on the march this morning that we knew we could never ever fill them. So in that little thing that we started the concert off with, we tried to put a little snippet of as many marches that you might perhaps associate with in as we possibly could. So for the lady who wanted the Life on the Ocean Wave, do you hear your 2 bars? Great. Just before we start the concert proper, there's a couple of little announcements we'd like to make, but first of all, to say a few short words, could I ask you to make welcome Coral Farrelly, please.
Quite that tall. The Honourable Con Shaka MP, Minister for Veterans Affairs, Lieutenant Colonel May Douglas, OBE, staff of the Australia Remembers Task Force, distinguished guests and fellow female veterans. On behalf of the women who served in the Defence Forces of Australia, I would like to thank the Prime Minister and the Minister for Veterans Affairs for making today possible. Thank you, sir. It is a day that we will long remember, especially for giving recognition to the women who served in the Defence Forces of Australia during World War II. To Mr Tony Ashford, Lisa Cahill, Naomi Rogers and the staff of the Australian Remembers Task Force, we say thank you for all the hard work and long hours you put into preparing these wonderful arrangements for us. Thank you to the serving members of the Australian Defence Forces for being part of our day, and for those responsible for the entertainment. I know it's going to be most enjoyable. To my friend and colleague, June Stone, BEM, Chairman of the Council of Ex-Service Women's Association New South Wales, who I know contributed in an advisory capacity and was responsible for doing the spade work in getting this commemoration putting in place. Thank you very much. On behalf of everybody, June. And thank you to Carolyn Toms and the hostesses for the commemoration, and all the hostesses, in fact. You did a wonderful job. Thank you, Carolyn, and all the other girls. And lastly, thank you all, the ex-servicewomen, from travelling from the various states throughout Australia to attend this historic commemoration event today, and regret that many were unable to attend and be with us today because of sickness. Thank you.
Some of us had a wonderful pleasure last night to meet some of you ladies at the reception here, and I personally had great delight to meet a lovely lady, Amy Taylor. And Amy would just like to now say a few words on behalf of you all to the Department of Veterans Affairs. Amy Taylor.
The Honourable Minister for Veteran Affairs, Con Shaka, if you'd like to come up to the podium, please. Minister, I'm very privileged and very proud indeed to be given the honour of presenting to you with a plaque on behalf of all of the female veterans who served in the Defence Forces during World War II, to show our appreciation to you and the Australia Remembers Task Force in Canberra and throughout Australia. I know that your dedication, your sincerity and the wonderful work that you do for veterans is very much appreciated by all of the veterans here today. During the lunchtime, we presented the PM with his token of appreciation, because we know that he was the one that gave the sanction, but by gee, it was your hard work and good talking that did the rest. Thank you very much, sir. We are very proud that you are our minister, and we hope you stay there forever. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy, and thank you, ladies. Some people have said they won't forget today. I won't forget it either. It was marvellous, and it's just an honour and a pleasure to know you all, or at least to have seen you all. I haven't met you all. God bless you, and I hope you have a good 1 hour left to you. Bye.
Thank you, Amy, and thank you, Minister. And I hope that what we're about to play for you this afternoon can, in fact, help you have some wonderful memories. And it's, in fact, appropriate that the first piece we really play this afternoon has a wonderful song in it. We'd like to play a little tribute to one of the most wonderful entertainers of the Second World War and who continued on after that. And, of course, I talk of Bob Hope. And that wonderful song that became synonymous with him, Thanks for the Memory. We hope that you can take that away with you this afternoon, but also some of these others, Buttons and Bows, but of course, most particularly, Thanks for the Memory, the music of Bob Hope. Thank you very much. The music of Bob Hope and terrific stuff. It's a very great delight this afternoon to have a young man with us, and we've not had, in fact, the privilege of singing with us before. And so it is a really terrific delight to welcome him on such a wonderful day as this. He's a young man from Goulburn. He came down to Canberra some time ago, and he works at the Australian National University, where he's a sports administrator, also studying a sports degree. But he also has a wonderful tenor voice. And we talked long and hard about what he might sing this afternoon, and we thought we'd start, though, with something that I'm sure many of you will remember, a song called Red Cross Nurse. Would you please welcome Patrick Oxley.
Every day we read of gallant deeds, unselfish acts of heroes by the score. Yet somehow one seldom ever reads of the valor of those girls we all adore. So let me pay a tribute here and now to those nurses. They deserve it all, I vow. Oh, the world admires you, Red Cross nurse. Sacrifice inspires you, Red Cross nurse. In our darkest hour, you tend to our needs with a smile. You're a precious flower that makes our life worthwhile. How can we repay you, Red Cross nurse? Nothing can dismay you, mid war's curse. Like Florence Nightingale, with spirit strong, you never fail when things go wrong. Good luck and God bless you, Red Cross nurse. All the world admires you, Red Cross nurse. Sacrifice inspires you, Red Cross nurse. In the darkest hour, you tend to our needs with a smile. You're a precious flower that makes our life worthwhile. How can we repay you, Red Cross nurse? Nothing can dismay you, mid war's curse. Like Florence Nightingale, with spirit strong, you never fail when things go wrong. Good luck and God bless you, Red Cross nurse.
Thank you. The next song that we're going to do for you this afternoon was written a number of years after the end of the Second World War, but I believe the song portrays many of the sentiments and feelings that were perhaps experienced during the war. A story about the song, it's basically about an older man who is singing a song. He sees many young men and women going off to battle, and he's praying to God that they come home safely, and it's called Bring Him Home. God on high, hear my prayer. In my need, you have always been there. He is young, he's afraid. Let him rest, heaven blessed. Bring him home, bring him home, bring him home. He's like the son I might have known if God had granted me a son. The summers die one by one, how soon they fly on and on. And I am old and will be gone. Bring him peace, bring him joy. He is young, he is only a boy. You can take, you can give, let him be, let him live. If I die, let me die. Let him live. Bring him home. Bring him home. Bring him Thanks very much. The next song we're going to do for you this afternoon is another war song. It's called Swinging Along the Road to Victory. And this picks up the tempo a bit. So. The bugler boy has sounded the call to arms, to fight for liberty. We sent our force of right, defying all their might, for we mean to keep our empire free. It's no wonder our songs ring around the world, as we march beneath the Union Jack unfurled. For we're swinging along the road to victory, swinging along the road to victory. I'm telling you, and you'll agree with me, we're in this fight for the sake of liberty, swinging along the road to victory. Never a job too tough for you and me now. Here's to the Army and Navy, boys in blue. Let us salute the Air Force, One, us too. Now for the love of old Aussie, a loud coo-wee, swinging along the road to victory. The cream of our youth have answered most loyally the call to volunteer. Our nation's sons elect march side by side erect, with no thought of danger or of fear. With them proudly march the boys from USA. So we now can raise our voices loud and say, for we're swinging along the road to victory. Swinging along the road to victory. We're hand in hand now with the USA. They're bringing help to Australia every day. Swinging along the road to victory. Roosevelt's and guard our land and sea now. Here's to America's doughboys, MacArthur's creed. Let us give thanks, Australia, friends indeed. Show that the Max and the Anzac stand for one creed. Swinging along the road to victory.
Patrick Oxley. Could I take this opportunity just to sneak in a little quick ad, if I may, for all our people who live in Canberra. Patrick has been such a delight to work with while we've been rehearsing for this concert that we've actually asked Patrick to come back and sing with us again. We are doing a concert on Wednesday the 9th of August, specifically for the Red Cross. It'll be in Llewellyn Hall at the Canberra School of Music, and Patrick will be one of our featured guest artists. We're having a lovely evening. It's called a Canberra Connection concert, and it is the Red Cross tribute to the war in the Pacific. It'll be a wonderful night. So Wednesday the 9th of August, particularly if you enjoyed Patrick singing this afternoon, he'll certainly be one of our featured guests that evening on the 9th of August. Thank you. Someone asked us before earlier on, and I'd take this opportunity because we just had a little bit of a trumpeting figure in that last piece. Many people during lunch came and asked me who was the bugler who played last post during the service. Could I introduce you to him, please? Alex Soren. Yeah, stand up, Alex. That's a very nerve-wracking business for anyone to play a bugle call in front of so many who value that so very much. We are delighted also to have in the band the bugler who went to Gallipoli and played on the dawn service on the Gallipoli commemorative event. He's multi-talented. You heard him play a trumpet solo earlier on. He's now got to go and play the drum kit, but he's up there. Warren Officer Keith Walker. Now, to the music of John Philip Sousa, and all the people sitting in the front row are about to get a big scare. We're about to play Liberty Bell, one of the famous Sousa marches. That's why they all sneaked away, see? It wasn't that they didn't like Patrick singing at all. Welcome them back, the Drum Corps. I guess just like some of the things that we were hearing this morning when the Prime Minister was speaking, our guys have got to do that these days and be multifaceted as well. That one of our oboe players also plays the drums. There he was, and there our percussionist up the back as well. Next, we'd like to feature a rather unusual musical instrument, and it's packed in something that you're, I guess, most familiar with, the 303 rifle. The 303 rifle just happens by pure chance to be about the similar size in tubing as a trumpet. So by inserting a trumpet mouthpiece into the end of the 303 rifle, we're hoping we can make some music out of it. Would you please welcome musician Stephen Carter? Now, that's a much better use for a 303, isn't it? It is really a great delight to introduce our next artist for you this afternoon. She is a lady who has sung for many years, and she, in fact, when she was 18, started singing to the American troops in the China, Burma and India conflict in that area of the war. She then later on went to London, and I think told me tongue-in-cheek that Vera Lynn, in fact, came to hear her sing rather than the other way around. She is a wonderful lady, and she is a real matriarch here in Canberra. She teaches still at the vocal jazz school at Manuka. She's been the inspiration for many, many singers, not just in Canberra, but throughout Australia and, in fact, throughout the world. Would you make her very welcome, our special guest this afternoon, Miss Jerry Scott.
Lord, am I on? I'm not on. Thank you, darling. Thank you, darling. Hello, everyone. I want to just have a quick little talk to you before I do this first song. I was 18 years old. I was in India, and I wanted to do something, so eventually my parents allowed me to join a thing called the American Special Services, which was a small group that went and entertained the American forces mostly the pilots and people connected with the airfields in Assam and then Burma and eventually in China. And at 18, I joined this group as a singer. And there were 4 of us all together, a pianist and another dancer and a comedian. And we had great fun in doing it. But the first show that I ever did, I suppose like with you, brings back memories. We all have one particular memory of that period. It was in a place called Sylhet, which is in Assam. And my memory serves me correctly, there was a sort of a mound. I wouldn't call it a hill, but it was a mound. And they had built this outdoor stage. And when I came up onto the stage in my long silver lame gown, feeling very frightened, there was dead silence. None of this take it off or anything, just dead silence. And I thought, oh God, they don't like me. And I started with this song that I'm going to start for you now. And I'm happy to say that the hills of Sylhet erupted when I finished it. I don't expect anything to erupt today. But it is a memory that I carry with me, and I hope you're going to enjoy it. And now the purple dusk of twilight time steals across the meadows of my heart. High up in the sky, the little stars climb, always reminding me that we're apart. You wander down the lane and far away, leaving me a song that will not die. Love is just the stardust of yesterday, the music of the years gone by. Sometimes I wonder why I spend the lonely nights dreaming of a song. That melody haunts my reverie, and I am once again with you. When our love was new, and each kiss an inspiration. Ah, that was long ago. Now my consolation is in the stardust of a song beside a garden wall. When the stars are bright, you are in my arms. The nightingale tells his fairy tale of paradise where roses bloom. Oh, I dream in vain. In my heart, it always will remain. My stardust melody, the memory of love's refrain. Thank you. Thank you. Let there be you. Let there be me. Let there be oysters under the sea. Let there be wind, occasional rain, chili con carne, sparkling champagne. Let there be birds to sing in the trees, someone to bless me whenever I sneeze. Let there be cuckoos, a lark and a dove, but first of all, please, let there be love. Sing in the trees. I want someone to bless me whenever I sneeze. Let there be cuckoos, a lark and a dove, but first of all, please, let there be love. I want some love. I want love. Ooh, 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 love. Yeah, I want love. Yeah, yeah, give me, give me, give me, give me, give me, give me, give me. Ooh, Ladies, I would like very much, I was going to say just ladies, but there are some gentlemen around, I think. Yeah. Oh, there's one here. I'd like you please to join with me before we go any further. Give a great hand to this wonderful orchestra, please. Thank you. Another just wee story to get you into this, because you might wonder why the heck I'm doing this song. In December 1944, I left home, went on the seas, and traveled to London, where I was extremely fortunate in getting a job with a band, Harry Roy and his band. And he was working at a place called the Milroy nightclub. We're talking about January 45. It was a terribly, terribly upper class, terribly distinguished club, actually, where everybody used to sort of dance, you know. And the song of the time, apart from all the war songs that people sing, but the top song in London, which every nightclub and every band and everybody else did, was the one I'm going to do for you now. And if I had $1 for every time I've sung this song, I'd probably still be standing here talking to you. I've wined and dined on mulligan stew, and I never wished for turkey. I've hitched and hiked and grifted too, from Maine to Albuquerque. Alas, I miss the Beaux-Arts ball But what is twice as sad, I was never at a party where they honored Noel Coward. His social circles spin too fast for me. My hobohemia, it's the place to be. 2, 2, 2, 3, 4. I get up. I get too hungry for dinner at 8. I love theater. I never come late. I won't mess around with people I hate. That is why this lady is a tramp. I won't go to dice games with barons and earls. You won't see me in Harlem dressed in ermine and pearls. I will not dish the dirt with the rest of the girls. That's why this lady is a tramp. Yep. I like the free, fresh wind in my hair, life without care. I'm broke and it's so. I hate California 'cause it's cold and it's damp. That's why this lady is a tramp. I go to Coney, the beach is divine. I go to ball games, the bleachers are just fine. I'm not so hot, but my body's all mine. And that's why this lady is a tramp. I won't go to crap games with barons and earls. I won't go to Harlem dressed up in ermine and pearls. I won't dish the dirt with the rest of the girls. That's why the lady is a tramp. I like that green grass under my shoes. Hey, what can I lose? I'm flat, and that's that. I'm all alone when I lower my lamp. That's why the lady, that's why the lady, that's why the lady is a tramp. I like, wait for it, the most important part, the free, fresh wind in my hair. It's all over the bloody place at the moment. But what do I care? I'm flat, that's that. I'm all alone when I lower my lamp. That's why the lady, I said the lady, that's why this lady is a tramp. It's Jerry Scott.
Thank you very much, Miss Jerry Scott, and what a wonderful lady she is. I thought we should play at least one serious piece of music this afternoon, and that's just what we'd like to do now. We've taken the music of the wonderful English composer Eric Coates, and it's the movie, music which was eventually used for the movie, the wonderful movie, The Dam Busters. Thank you. Listen, we've done all the work this afternoon. I think it's about your turn. We've got a bit of a surprise. There's a lady in the audience this afternoon, and her name is Marjorie Smith. Marjorie Smith was in the Women's Air Service, Women's Army Service in Townsville, and she worked on the searchlights in Townsville. Is that right? Am I close to being right there? We've got a surprise for you, Marjorie, because your daughter is in the audience this afternoon. And I was talking to you earlier on, and you were lamenting the fact that you were down visiting Canberra, that you wouldn't be able to hear your daughter sing. Your daughter's sitting over here. This is Gillian Donaldson, your daughter, and Gillian's going to sing for you now. Ladies and gentlemen, one of Canberra's finest singers, Miss Gillian Donaldson. None of this is in your program, but she's going to sing a little medley of war songs with the band, and I hope that you'd like to join in with Gillian as well.
The White Knight. the band are in on this secret. And these were songs, actually, I phoned my mum a few weeks ago and said, Mum, of all the songs that you remember in the Second World War, apart from the wonderful songs from Dame Vera Lynn, which were the songs that were really important to you? And she said, the songs we marched to. So this is what we're going to do, and I hope you're going to sing with me because these are very special. Pack up your troubles in your old kit bag and smile, smile, smile. You can do it. Life is a lucifer to light your fag. Smile, boys, that's the style. What's the use of worrying? It never was worthwhile. So pack up your troubles in your old kit bag and smile, smile, smile. And again, pack up your troubles in your old kit bag and smile, smile, smile. While there's a lucifer to light your fag, smile, boys, that's the style. What's the use of worrying? It never was worthwhile. So pack up your troubles in your old kit bag and smile, smile, smile. Mademoiselle from Armentie, parlez-vous? Mademoiselle from Armentie, parlez-vous? Mademoiselle from Armentie. I wonder what those words were. Hey. Mademoiselle from Armentie, parlez-vous? Mademoiselle from Armentie, parlez-vous? Mademoiselle from Armentie. Pinky, pinky, parlez-vous? It's a long way to Tipperary. It's a long way to go. It's a long way to Tipperary, to the sweetest gal I know. Goodbye, Piccadilly. Farewell, Wester Square. It's a long, long way to Tipperary. My heart lies there. It's a long way to Tipperary. It's a long way to go. It's a long way to Tipperary, to the sweetest gal I know. Off the back. Goodbye, Piccadilly. Farewell, Leicester Square. It's a long, long way to Tipperary, 'cause my heart lies there. It lies there. Thank you very much, Major McCann. And thank you, President.
Gillian Donaldson. Thank you, Gillian Donaldson. Terrific. Might I just add that when we do that concert for the Red Cross, Gillian will be singing on that concert with us as well. So the 9th of August for that concert, all those people who live in Canberra. We have nearly come to the end of our concert this afternoon, and I know the caterers will be getting concerned out there because afternoon tea is nearly ready for you. But I couldn't think of a better way to end the concert this afternoon than by going back to the 1940s. And what we've tried to do, we've been very, very lucky, and we've managed to locate some of the exact original arrangements used by the Glenn Miller Band. So what we're going to do, thank you. So what we're going to do, in fact, the Glenn Miller Band didn't have a lot of the instruments that we now have. So some of us are going to have a bit of a rest, but we're going to use, in fact, the exact authentic instruments and the authentic arrangements that Glenn Miller used when he wrote things like In the Mood. Thank you for being a wonderful audience this afternoon. Before we go and have some cup of tea, let's listen to Glenn Miller.
One, two, three.
Thank you very much. Thank you, ladies. How kind. Thank you. I've just got a couple of announcements. Before we go, there is a reunion for the WAF and RAF who served at the RO4 Albert Park Barracks in Melbourne. Oh, the reunion is at the Albert Park Barracks in Melbourne on the September the 2nd, 1995, at the Air Force Memorial Centre in South Yarra, Melbourne. Anyone who'd like to chase that up a little bit further, there's a couple of names here. Pat Lloyd, whose maiden name was Watkins, and Rita Ryan, whose maiden name was Bayliss. And I'm sure they'll be around the... How about we, if Rita and Pat could perhaps see anyone who wanted to do that, if they could meet just around the right-hand side during afternoon tea. That would be a good thing for that. I've got one more. Aha, yes. Oh, good. This is a good one. Because a lot of people asked about this at lunchtime as well. And I should mention the lady who sent this is the wonderful lady who's organised this on behalf of Conshaka, Lisa Carl. There she is over there in the black. Lisa, come up, Lisa. You should come up and say the bow. Lisa's been absolutely tireless in her work, particularly for today. She's great. Lisa Carl. Terrific. Just before we go, could I please bring back, and would you thank them very much, Patrick Oxley and Jerry Scott. Jerry Scott, Patrick Oxley. And finally, some terrific ladies and gentlemen that it is really my wonderful pleasure to work with, the band of the Royal Military College, Duntroon. Thank you. Thank you very much, ladies, for a wonderful day. Could I just say on behalf of us all, thank you very much for the memories. They'll be great. Thank you. Good afternoon.